Hey guys, and welcome back. In this exercise, we're going to be changing the color of a beautiful sweater. Okay, let's go into simple coloring 4.jpg. What a beautiful sweater. I'm going to hit F4 full screen, and we're going to start off. Obviously, we need to target this red. So, not a lot of other reds in this picture. She's got some red in her skin, but we should be able to target that with our hue saturation. So let's go to Layer, down to New Adjustment Layer, and Hue Saturation. Let's hit OK there. And here we want to choose our red. So let's go to Master, down to Reds. Make sure to use your little eyedropper tool and go ahead and select a nice red right in about the mid-tone. There we go. That looks nice. And we're going to go ahead and start moving our hue slider to the left and the right. All right. And you're going to see it did a nice job selecting reds, but it's also getting the skin tone too. And sometimes I like to just crank up my saturation too. I'm not going to leave it there. I'm just like trying to get a good idea of what's being colored by this layer. Okay, so now we have to try to not have this be visible on our skin tone. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my little slider here. I'm going to click in the middle of this gray area and drag this to the left and right. Okay, and as I drag, I'm just kind of like see over here, it's getting mostly her skin and not the sweater. And over here, it's getting mostly the sweater and not her skin. So you kind of want to find like a nice in-between area. That looks pretty good. And now for the rest of it, all we need to do is just a little bit of painting on our layer mask. So we're just going to paint black on our layer mask. You can see how having that saturation, let's go to our reds, having our saturation way up just kind of identifies the areas that are getting colored by this. It's really easy to see them, right? I hope so. There we go. So we'll just paint black on our layer mask where these areas are. Okay, because obviously we don't want those to be colored. So let's go ahead and zoom in. There we go. Now I'm going to let a little bit of the color from the camera. This camera is reflecting a little bit of color from the sweater, so I'm going to let a little bit of that stay. But mostly we just do not want this to be visible on our subject's skin, right? All right, so let's go ahead and paint it black right over there. And again, remember that these are just layer masks. So if I paint a little bit, paint it away on accident, no big deal. We just go right back in here and we just paint it back white. So just remember, white on your layer mask makes the layer visible and black makes it invisible. There we go. And you can change it at any time. And you should be saving your files as either PSDs or TIFFs. Those are going to have your layers in them. And as long as you're doing that, you can come in here and make adjustments years later. Really, it's not, there we go. It's not like a one-time thing. You can continue to adjust your layer mask for as long as you want to. Just make sure that you're saving out a layered file, like a PSD or a TIFF. All right. And keep in mind also that this is like an extremely exaggerated version of what we're going to be coloring. So if when you're painting things away, if it's not like absolutely perfect, keep in mind that those changes are going to be super minimal once we bring our saturation back to the regular levels. Okay, I just need to make this visible a little bit in there. So let's paint white on our layer mask. Nice soft edge brush there. There we go. All right, and we're almost done here, guys. Already we've had so many cool examples of changing colors. And you get to see every image presents a new situation, a new problem that we get to solve together. So that's one of the reasons why we included so many examples in this tutorial, is because even though you might start an image the same way, your chances are you're going to have a different set of issues depending on which image you're working on. Okay, that looks great. So let's click here. I'm going to go back to our reds. You can see my values are cranked way up. So let's go ahead and make that 0 for my saturation. And so as I bring my hue from left to right, we are looking pretty good. pretty good here. You'll notice the farther you get from your color, like here's red, the farther you get, it starts to degrade a little bit. Like you can see it right down there and right over there. So, and over here, you're gonna see it's starting to degrade a little bit as well. Let's see if we can just kind of like bring our, there we go, kind of bring this slider out. Maybe try to include a little bit more. All right, here we're including a little bit more, and that does look a little bit better. I just need to get in here and paint black on my layer mask. So it's not showing up there. All right, and the same in the hair. I didn't see it in her hair earlier. Pretty funny. Well, we did adjust. That makes sense, because we did adjust where is going to be visible and where is not going to be visible. All right, so we're looking great. Let's go right up to the edge of the, there we go. Make sure this is not visible in her hair. Okay, now we are gonna have a little bit of cleanup here, not a big deal, but first let's choose our color. So let's go to our reds, and you know what, I just said the farther away we get from here, the tougher it is. So let's go ahead and choose this blue color here that we had, because it is pretty far from red. Okay, there are always a few things to keep in mind because colors reflect off of different objects. Like if I'm wearing a red shirt, there's going to be a little bit of red here on the table because, you know, light bounces around, and when it hits an object, it gets a little bit of that color and then bounces around and kind of reflects that color around. So just because you change the color of one object, you want to make sure to look around there and see if the original color is influencing anything. And in this image, you're going to see that, in fact, it is. See this red here that's right on the bottom of our subject's arm? Her arm's not actually red. What that's doing is it's reflecting the red that's here coming from the sweater. And you don't notice it here, but when you make that blue, all of a sudden, you're going to notice it. So let's break a new layer. I'm going to go to Select and Color Range. I want to select that color. So let's select Color Range. I'm going to click there, and I'm going to lower down. There we go. I'm going to lower down our fuzziness. So I'm going to see if I can just get that color. And it makes sense. Look at where it's selecting. All the areas that are facing kind of down, right? It's like the bottom of the neck, you know, the bottom of the fingers, bottom of this area right around the sleeve. This makes sense because these areas are facing the sweater. Like the bottom of the neck is facing the sweater, right? So all those areas are being affected by this color. So let's hit OK. So we're selecting that color. And on this layer, what we're going to do is I'm going to fill this layer. We got a selection. I'm going to fill it with this blue color. So let's hit B for our brush tool. Now I'm going to hold Alt or Option, and I'm going to sample right here, nice in the midtones. You don't want to sample too much in the highlights or shadows. Sample right there in the midtones. So I'm on my new layer. I got my selection. I got my blue color. Let's hit Shift Delete. We're going to fill this with our foreground color. It's this nice blue here. There we go. And let's deselect by hitting Control or Command D. Now, obviously, that doesn't look at all real. So what we're going to do is change our layer blend mode from normal down to hue. All right. And we're going to start to reflect some of that blue. Okay. Let's see what color does. All right. We should stick it back on hue. Obviously, it's way too strong. So let's just lower the opacity. So as we lower the opacity, you can see, there we go. We've got a little bit of that blue reflection going on. There we go. And that's kind of evening things out a little bit. All right. I think that looks really good. Let's lower the opacity just a little bit more on that. Now, if we want to do any touch-up work, which in this case I want to do a little bit of touch-up work because there's still a little bit of red here on the bottom of the arm. You don't have to make selections if you don't want to. Sometimes you can just use the brush tool and just paint over there. So let's create a new layer. I'm going to change our layer blend mode from normal. Let's just go down to color right now. And I'm going to hit B for the brush tool and just sample this color there. And I'm just going to paint right over there. See, I'm going to paint there, and it's just going to change it to this color. Okay, so just making that, let's zoom in there. See, it's got that red, invisible, and visible again. I'm just changing it to that color. Okay, and you can do it right here too. You know, you can say this color, and you want to use kind of a soft edge brush so it kind of bleeds into the other, right? You want to see it's kind of like bleeding in to right around the hand. There we go. Same here. I'm going to sample this color and kind of paint it in right around there. You're going to see we're going to get just a nice natural effect going on. All right. Because colors, remember, they bounce off each other. You know, they're going crazy over there. They're just like anytime light hits a color, it's going to bounce off the nearest object. So sometimes you got to come in here and say, like, you know what? This is kind of curve around to the background, so we need to get a little bit of the background color on that. All right, same thing here. We're just going to get this color, you know, sample it and paint it right out to the edge there. That's going to get rid of any, you know, weird color fringing that we have. And then we're going to kind of come back here and do the same thing back there again. So make that invisible, invisible again. You can see it just kind of gets rid of any fringing issues you may have. We'll do that, you know, in her hair, obviously. We're going to grab the color of her hair, paint it in here a little bit. Okay. Grab the color of her neck. So Alt or Option just with the brush tool here. And we're just kind of, see, we're getting rid of any of that red or purple or any weird, you know, any weird colors that are showing up. You know, see, I'm adding some brown back to the hair here. All right. Getting rid of that. And now we just get this blue color and we kind of fill in wherever needs to be filled in. See, some brown back in the hair here. I'm just painting over the hair. You know, my layer blend mode is set to color. And we're just painting right over that. And if I need a little bit of that pop, you know, there we go. Just bring the sweater color right up to the very edge there. You want to use a nice small brush for that. There we go. And don't feel like you got to do it in one pass. You can, you know, select your colors, kind of go back and forth like I'm doing. I can't do it perfectly the first go, so, you know, don't pressure yourself. There we go. How nice is that? And that's a really nice looking edge there. Let's just make sure that turns to brown. Bonk. See? It's brown now. Alrighty, pretty nice. Now, you may be asking yourself, why didn't you just take the brush tool and just paint with your blue color over the whole thing and then just change that to color? Because color blend mode does take into account saturation, so it was not going to look good as the highlights and shadows. So I'll just show you what I mean real quick before we move on. So let's make those invisible, because remember, we just changed the hue, right? So if I made a new layer and just chose my color, turn those back on. So I'm on a new layer. I've got my blue color as my foreground color. Okay, and I'm going to just paint over there and change this layer blend mode from normal to color. All right, I'm going to do a very rough job here because I'm just showing you for example. Will it change the blue sweater, the red sweater to blue? Yes, it will, most definitely, but it's going to look flat. It's going to look really flat because it all has the same saturation. So see what that looks like. You know, and in fact, I'm just going to make a little snapshot of it so you can, there we go. Don't worry about all that. So see what that looks like, and we'll compare it to this. So you can see this looks really flat. See how it's the same saturation in the highlights and the shadows? This is different. It's less saturated in the shadows, more saturated in the highlights, so we get a much more dynamic, more realistic looking image. So you want to do the bulk of your color work using hue, and then in this case I just needed to kind of like go in and fix some stuff. That's why I used color blend mode to kind of fix all that stuff up. So we do have a little bit of a reflection going on. Let's take care of that. New layer here. B for the brush tool. Let's go ahead and sample here. I'm just going to paint right over here. See, there's not even much. We'll change our layer blend mode to hue. And there we go. Just there was a slight red hue right there, reflecting from the red sweater. So turning that off and on, you can see pretty subtle, we're just reflecting that. And then we can bring in a little bit of this blue right down here to reflect that. See on the bottom of the hand how it's still a little bit red? Bringing that in with hue, and it's subtle. You just want to use a super large soft edge brush for this and go subtle with it. And there we go. You can see it kind of like, now it really looks like, there we go. Let's pop that in just a little bit. It really looks like it's actually reflecting the blue of the sweater. Now, I realize I haven't told you the difference between opacity and flow when you're painting with your paintbrush, whether you're using a mouse or a tablet or a trackpad. Opacity and flow, big deal. So let me show you guys that because it's going to really help out. All right, let's create a new layer. And I'm going to start off with my opacity and my flow for my brush. So you can see brush tool, opacity, and flow. If they're both at 100, it just looks like this. It just covers everything, right? Now, if I bring my opacity down to like 30%, you can use 1 through 0 on your keyboard to change that, by the way. It's going to lay down 30% opacity. Just do it over her face so you can see. Okay. Now, if I go over an area over and over again, it's not going to add anything else. It's just 30%. Now, if I let go and I do it again, it's going to give me another 30%. Okay, and I let go and do it again, it's going to give me another 30%. And I let go and do it again, it's going to give me another 30%. Well, this isn't a very natural way of building up or easing, transparent into opaque, right? This is a very like computer Photoshop-y way. Like if you had a marker and you were like on a piece of paper, if you went over it once and kept going over it over, like it would get darker and darker and darker, right? That's what flow does. So this is opacity. It's not going to get darker if you go over it a billion times. You have to lift it up and then do it again, but it just does another 30%. So in contrast, here's what flow does. I'm going to hit shift. Let's hit shift 1 to bring our flow to 10%. If I go over an area, it's like 10% opacity, right? But if I keep going over that area, it builds up. Okay? And you can see I can go from opaque to transparent really nice and naturally. You know, you can't see any lines here. There's no lines. This is just, I haven't let go yet, by the way. This is one continuous brush stroke. It's just building and building it up. So you can see from transparent to opaque, really nice and natural. So that really helps out when you're doing this kind of stuff too, right? Like if I wanted a little bit of this blue to be reflected in the camera, I can create a new layer. Okay, sample this blue color, change my layer blend mode from normal down to color, just put some color in there, and then I can just start building it up right here, over here with a big soft edge brush, right? Just a really big soft edge brush, and it's gonna start to lay some of that blue in there. Okay, let me do another example that's maybe a little bit more obvious. We'll do the bottom of the hand again. So paint it a little bit in there, and you can see once it looks good, you just stop. Because if I keep going and going and going, then it's too much. So you just want to paint a little bit of it in there, boom, and once it looks like it's good, you stop. But if you keep going, it's too much. So we're going to use flow and opacity quite a bit in this tutorial. So if you feel like you still need a little bit of help, don't worry about it. We will show you. But basically, I usually keep my opacity at 100 and I keep my flow down around 10% because I just like to build up those effects. I find you get a lot more of a natural looking transition from opaque to transparent. Anyway, there we have it. We look really good. So let's go ahead. You know what? I do want a little bit of color right here on the sweater. See, you gotta, anytime you get something right next to the sweater, right next to that blue, it's gotta reflect it a little bit. But I think we did a really nice job. Let's delete these other layers and group those. So let's see, here's our before and our after. Looking really, really nice. Oh, you know what? It colored some stuff over there. So let's be sure to go back to my hue saturation layer. I'm just gonna make a big old lasso selection and click on my layer and hit Shift Delete. We'll fill that with black. There we go. So there's our before and the after. Looking really good. Okay guys, we'll see you in the next example.